Today I'm going to be ranking all the main bosses in Elden Ring based on how good I think they are. Elden Ring is home to some amazing boss fights, each with their own set of moves, phases, and attacks, which makes the game so special to play and learn. But I'm not going to be going over all of the bosses, so we're not rotting corpses by the end of this video, so I'm going to be going over the 15 main bosses, which are the ones who drop remembrances. So with that said, let's get into the tier list. Moving into the dark, we have the Furry's Wet Dream, the Regal Ancestor Spirit. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad boss, it's just the least great. This boss is a really cool idea, and the look of the boss and its arena all look badass. It's just the boss is so uninteresting. Most of the attacks of the boss are magic based, but all of them are very telegraphed and easy to dodge, with the most interesting attack being the 3 jumps into the sky then ass crashing onto the ground. But attacks like the kick and the slow moving magic mist bullshit just makes the boss way too easy and boring. While the boss is easy, it has a stupid magic attack that if too close will damage you a bunch and heal the boss for about 33% of its max HP, drawing out an already boring boss fight. It's not a boss of anything special, so it goes into the C tier. Getting all spooky and shit, we have Astel, Naturalborn of the Void. Astel, while having one of the coolest names here, is a very interesting fight, but not a fun fight in practice, using gravity magic to deal most of its damage. At the start of the fight, Astel will use their tail to deal damage, but you can't really see the tail unless you're looking up, which will bite you in the ass if you don't know the timing. This is also a boss that will look very different depending on your playstyle. If you use magic, this boss will become a lot more interesting and enjoyable, given that you're able to see everything Astel does. But if you're melee based, you'll end up mainly staring into this guy's nutsack, dealing damage until you're hit by some gravity magic. Astel also has one of the coolest and most bullshit moves where they make many different portals and have illusions of Astel lunging out trying to grab you. So you have to guess which Astel is real and dodge accordingly. But if you get hit by the grab, it's instant death, so you better guess correctly. Overall, this is an alright boss fight, but there's a lot of things holding it back. C tier. Entering the dream of the deathbed companion, we have the Lichdragon Fortissax. Dragon bosses in Souls games have always been notorious for being underwhelming, boring, or bad, but Fortissax does an alright job. Fortissax primarily uses lightning attacks to deal damage, slamming the ground to create a lightning shockwave or attacking the ground with his claw with a delayed lightning attack that always manages to hit you. This boss also falls under the not that interesting type of bosses, with most of their attacks coming from hitting you with his wings, tail, or lunging at the ground, which doesn't make Fortissax stand out that much from all the other dragon bosses in this game. The only real redeeming part of this fight is the 2 lightning bolts he uses during the second phase of the boss fight, but he doesn't really get to show off all of his moves due to the phase of this fight being pretty short. But overall, this is definitely a better fight than most of the dragon bosses in this game. C tier. Way up into the mountains, we have the Fire Giant, the last of his kind. Before we start, the Fire Giant has the best theme in this game, and you cannot convince me otherwise. With that out of the way, let's get into the fight. The Fire Giant enjoyment factor will also depend on your playstyle, with this boss favoring melee builds. But overall, you'll see more of the fight on a mage build. The Fire Giant is of course fucking huge with a fat nutsack to boot, so if you're a melee based player, you'll really end up staring at this dude's crippled foot rather than anything else. So as a melee player, you won't really get hit by any of his attacks, but the boss kind of boils down to foot swiping simulator on a horse and doesn't really change throughout the fight. Eventually, after enough times punching the fuck out of this guy's foot, he'll get sick of your shit and break off his own leg and offer it to his god, which happens to be inside of his fucking stomach. He then continues the fight, crawling around and becoming some fucking volcano, which looks fucking sick. But as long as you avoid his fireballs, you'll be fine. Overall, this is a very enjoyable boss fight, or a very fucking boring boss fight, depending on who you ask. So it goes in the B tier. Away in her grand library, we have Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. This boss is what the Deacons of the Deep wishes it could have been, with this fight being a gimmick fight. But don't let that fool you into thinking this is a bad boss. You start off the fight seeing Rennala in a shield and one specific nun on the ground having a glow around them singing a song. Once you hit 3 of these little shits, Rennala falls from her shield, allowing you to wail on her for a little while, until she replenishes her shield, blowing you up if you're caught too close. Then repeat until the health bar is depleted. Once her health bar is fully depleted, her next phase will trigger, having you fight her one-on-one. To start the fight, she launches a giant fuck-off laser beam, which isn't that hard to dodge. She then proceeds to use magic spells and spinning or throwing her staff. Getting her down to half health will cause her to also start summoning spirits to kick your ass, like wolves, a troll, and even a fucking dragon. But if you ignore these spirits, you could probably kill her before she kills you. Now, what makes this boss such a mid fight? Well, depending on whether you're using magic or not, she'll either be one of the easiest boss fights in the game, or one of the fucking hardest, given that she has magic resistance out the ass. So she's an annoying ass boss fight for magic users, but fuck magic users, they deserve it, B tier. Making our way into the Erd Tree, we have the final boss of this game, the Elden Beast and Radagon. Now this is definitely a hard boss fight the way that it's set up. You first fight Radagon, which has lightning attacks, bullshit AoE, and hits hard and fast. Oh, I also forgot to tell you that he fucking teleports. Radagon is a hard fucker to beat, but once you get his basic attacks down, he really isn't that hard of a fight. But let's say you beat Radagon, but you've run low on flasks. Well, I hope you like getting your balls busted because you get thrown into the Elden Beast fight as soon as you kill Radagon, making this boss so fucking hard. The Elden Beast uses a lot of magic attacks in the form of beams of light, and some of these attacks are pretty cool, like having to jump over the closing rings of light and such. But this fucker's got a ton of HP and some of his attacks are kinda bullshit. He's also big as fuck, so here's another boss fight where you're gonna have to be punching this guy's nutsack just to kill him. This fight isn't bad by any means, but I don't like bosses that will either be really cool or really boring depending on what playstyle you use. So Radagon and the Elden Beast go into the B tier. Deep within the Halig tree we have the goddess of bullshit, Malenia. Now let me be clear, just because this boss is hard doesn't mean the boss is all that good. Don't get me wrong, she's an amazing boss fight, she just has some problems. Malenia has a couple things going in her favor. She has lifesteal, which even goes through shields, fast attacks with long combos, and a damn near insta-kill move that is hard to dodge. Now going back to that lifesteal shit, you can end up doing a lot of damage to her only for you to get hit 3 times and she heals back all the progress that you made, which makes this boss fight drag out like shit. Once you actually end up doing some damage to her, she then whips out the instant win button and charges you with her swinging blades, which is almost impossible to dodge without taking damage. And if you do take damage, you're either dead because of hit stun or she heals back everything you did to her, making her hard as fuck. Once you do manage to kill her the first time, she then rots off all of her clothes and becomes the goddess of rot. Or the goddess of hot depending on how horny you are, which in turn turns shit up to 11. Her attacks now do Scarlet Rot buildup and she can nuke the area around her with Scarlet Rot whenever she wants. Oh, and she also keeps her instant win button. Now, the second phase is a lot better than the first phase, but the second phase is hard as balls. Her first phase really brings down this boss for how long it drags out and how easy it is just to die, but her second phase really makes her shine, so she ends up in the A tier. Alright, now we got Maliketh, the Black Blade. Wow, how racist. Walking into the room, you're greeted by an imposter in the shape of the Beast Clergyman. He charges at you, throws rocks and shit, and jabs fast attacks you with his dagger. Overall, not that interesting of a first phase. Getting him down to half health makes him realize that being black is a superpower, so he stabs the fuck out of his death room and burns off his clothes, revealing that he's a giant dog-looking thing. He then proceeds to jump around, slamming the ground with a delayed explosion, and he'll also jump pillar to pillar, launching death attacks at you. Now, what makes this boss so hard is how relentless his attacks are. There's never a slow moment in this boss with how much he jumps around. It never seems like you have an opening to attack. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, if you get hit by his attacks, you take damage over time and lose 25% of your max HP, making you susceptible to one-shots. The second phase never lasts too long, so it's about finding the openings to attack. Overall, a great boss. A tier. Now we have the boss that manages to kick our ass on 2 separate occasions. Morgott, the Omen King. Morgott is in fact Morgott. Wow, what a shocker, never saw that one coming. Now to get into the fight, Morgott keeps around the same moveset from the first fight, using magic hammers, spears, and throwing knives. His attacks are fast and he moves around the arena pretty fast, so he can be pretty hard to keep up with. He can also summon a bunch of light swords to rain down upon you, which forces you to back up. Getting him down to his second phase reminded him that he has leukemia, so he starts coughing all over the place, hoping that he can give you COVID-19 before he dies, taking your shit all over the place, creating poop geysers that can launch up and hit you. He then ramps up his attacks even more, becoming even faster. He doesn't really gain any new attacks aside from a grab that'll fuck you up if you fail to dodge it, but nothing all that new. Still a great boss though, A tier. Returning to the lands between, ready to clean the Elden Ring, we have Godfrey. Godfrey is an interesting boss, but not all that memorable for me, but I will say he has the fight style that I love to play against. Godfrey has some heavy hitting slow attacks and he's relentless with these attacks as well. Never a dull moment in the fight. He stomps, swings his axe, and has a lot of fun moves to dodge. This fight is the best example of my favorite type of fights, which are the ones that feel like a dance. Dodging, rolling through attacks perfectly, and this boss does that the best. Once you learn the inside outs of this boss will become really easy due to the lack of bullshit moves, already making this a great boss to fight. Now let's get into the actual boss. As previously mentioned, Godfrey swings, throws, and creates craters with his axe, but the fight completely switches up in his second phase, murdering the lion on his back and going from a cool name like Godfrey to Bob the Destroyer. Oh shit, never mind. Horaloo, my bad. Godfrey ditches his axe because he's too cool for that shit and decides to battle you in a round of fisticuffs, where he tries to grab and punch the fuck out of you. I really like the idea of this phase, but I feel like they could have done so much more with it. His moves in this phase are just really uninteresting, but this is still an amazing boss. A tier. Moving on to the next and better Omen, we have Mohg, Lord of Blood. Mohg is one of the most interesting bosses on this list, having a very interesting way to fight. You'll start to notice that Mohg will count up as you continue to deal damage to him, and like your mom, when he counts to 3, you're in for a real ass beating. Mohg will launch Fire Blood with his trident and rush you down with thrusting attacks, but the real fun starts when he counts to 3. Once he does count to 3, he stabs into a portal shouting "Nah heal," dealing damage to you and healing himself. There is no way to stop this damage, so it forces you to sack off 2 healing flasks just to survive the attack. He then gains wings and heals himself for 50% of his HP. Then his attacks get even harder to dodge due to the amount of blood on the arena that will hurt a lot. Now what makes this boss not too difficult is the fact that he's weak to bleed damage, ironically, allowing you to deal huge damage to him if you're wailing on him hard enough. So I was able to beat him after like 7 tries, but that shouldn't take away from how cool this boss is. A tier. Now we get into the first good dragon boss ever, Placidusax, the Dragonlord. Now the main problem with all dragon bosses prior is the lack of interesting moves and how weak they are to hiding under them and punching their nutsack. So this boss likes to keep his distance and attack you with claw attacks and other interesting moves. If you try hiding under him, he'll punish you with lightning attacks that are hard to avoid. So you really have to pick and choose when you want to go in and attack. Going into his second phase has him disintegrate into thin air, then reappearing around the arena trying to hit you with his claws, which keeps you on your toes throughout the entire fight. And when you thought the fight couldn't get any fucking cooler, he uses his 2 heads to launch fucking laser beams across the arena that you have to jump over to survive. What makes this boss so good is previously mentioned attacks that force you to dodge and look for an opening. The moves that he does are sick to dodge and look fucking awesome, and I love the teleporting that he does due to it being more cinematic rather than bullshit, with him giving you plenty of time to see him coming and dodging accordingly. This is overall an amazing fight and probably the best dragon boss in all of Souls games. S tier. Lurking in his bone-filled dungeon, we have the second gimmick fight, Rykard. Starting off this fight, you're meted with a god-devouring serpent, a snake boss that will lunge trying to bite and grab you. Now, the serpent is surrounded by a constant pool of lava, making your weapons pretty useless. But by picking up the Serpent Hunter, it allows you to deal thousands of damage to the serpent, constantly knocking him down and dealing massive damage, with you eventually killing the serpent. After the serpent falls to the ground, it's then revealed that Rykard was the serpent all along, grabbing his blade out of the throat of the serpent, starting the second phase. The fight doesn't change much, with Rykard swinging his sword at you in a slow motion, which is pretty easy to avoid, but the real challenge is when he releases all the trapped souls the serpent has eaten through skulls. These skulls will home in on you, blowing up when they get too close. Doesn't sound all that bad until you realize how many there are, and while you're avoiding all these skulls, Rykard is still attacking you, making this a very challenging but a very fun boss fight. S tier. Roaming in the desert eating the dead, we have Starscourge Radahn. Radahn is considered to be one of the best bosses in the game by the player base, and I can't even blame him. Radahn is more of a cinematic boss fight, but don't let that fool you. He still manages to be an insane boss to fight. Moving into the desert, you're allowed to summon companions and lead your small army to take down Radahn to put him at peace. Radahn will start the fight shooting gravity arrows at you, dealing huge damage if you get hit by them. Once you get close, Radahn will unsheath his swords and start attacking you from horseback. Radahn will ride around getting hits in with his slow-moving and hard-hitting attacks, not leaving you much room to attack him, with him lunging, slamming, and using gravity magic to deal with you and your army. Once you get him down to half health, he says fuck this shit and dips out from the arena, never to be seen again. Pretty weird, honestly, not having a satisfying ending with him just leaving, then fucking wham! Here he comes flying back into the arena riding a fucking comet, which is one of the most iconic attacks in this game. He then turns shit up to 11 with his attacks, using more gravity magic to launch away you and your allies. He also likes to set up this huge one-shot combo where he lifts 4 rocks out of the ground, launches all of them at you, then charges at you with his sword, dealing massive damage. Now this is one of the coolest boss fights in the game, and everything about this boss just seems perfect, so this is obviously an S tier boss. After traversing Stormvale Castle and making it to the graveyard, we see the man, the myth, Godrick the Grafted. Godrick is in my opinion the best boss in this game just on how fair, fun, and cool the boss is. It nails everything right on the head. Godrick is revealed to have tons of arms and legs due to all the grafting he did to become so powerful, and slams his axe into the ground commanding you to bend to his will. Godrick's attacks are what you want in a boss. Hard-hitting, slow and fast, and attacks that force you to move and adapt. Godrick mainly uses his axe to deal damage, following up attacks with his many arms to deal combos, forcing you to dodge perfectly or back up. Speaking of backing up, Godrick will use his axe to smash into the ground, creating a shockwave that will force you to back up and give him some space. But just when you think you're ready for him, he does a quick combo of attacks that feel amazing to time and roll through, being another boss that feels more like a dance than a fight. There's just so many ways you can beat him and dodge his attacks. When shit starts hitting the fan for Godrick, he then decides to do the most optimal thing. Cut his fucking arm off, stick his nub into the head of a dragon, rip the dragon head off, then use the fucking dragon head as an attack. A fucking masterpiece. Starting off his second phase, he breathes fire all across the arena, making you think quick. Then using the dragon head to attack you, breathing fire or launching lava like a fucking volcano until you eventually beat him. If this boss was the first boss, it would have been the best first boss in Souls history, for how fucking cool the boss is, and it teaches you how to play by the rules of the game. Overall, my favorite and best fight in this game. S tier. And that's about it. Now that everything is ranked, this is the entire tier list. And I think it's pretty accurate. Anywho, if you like this video and want to see more, please consider subscribing. There will be some more videos at the end that I think you'll really enjoy. But with that said, thank you all so much for watching,